Hi guys, Buildzoid here, and this is going to be an attempt to cover like all of the X570 and X470 motherboards that are listed on PC Part Picker with actual price tags. And because, well, let's see, how many are there that don't have prices? Oh, I guess we might even include some of the ones that don't have prices. Anyways, I've excluded all of the X370 and B350 motherboards because I don't think you should be buying a motherboard that's 2 generations old. That's like, yeah, 2 generations old at this point. Yeah, and the point of this video is, well, Black Friday is coming up, Christmas is coming up. I expect to get bombarded with stupid questions about, hey, Buildzoid, is this motherboard good? And I don't really feel like answering them all individually, so I'm just going to go through all of the boards right here and share a few thoughts on every single one of them. And yeah, I'm not going to give more detail than this. Like, if you haven't seen this video, well, I'm probably just going to send you this video as an answer to any questions going forward. So let's dive into it, starting off with the Asrock X570 Aqua. Did you think the $500 creator is not expensive enough? Well, then the Aqua is for you because it's got the exact same feature set and then it has a water block and it costs twice as much. I think this board is really dumb. Like the VRM on this is also the same as the Aqua, so the VRM doesn't need water cooling in the first place. Like, I just think this board is dumb. Moving on, and we do have to go really quickly. There is a lot of bloody boards. Next up, Auris X570 Extreme from Gigabyte. I have one of these boards from Gigabyte. They gave it to me. I like it a lot, but at $700, like, this is a motherboard you buy when you've run out of things to spend money on, as in you have two 2080 Ti's, you have your 3950X, you have a full custom water cooling loop, and you just can't figure out where to burn the next, like, you know, you still got a pile of cash to burn. Yeah, this is the motherboard you buy in that situation. Noteworthy feature is that this has 10 gig LAN, which the Aqua has as well, and that also has Thunderbolt 3, but I just think that this is not a motherboard you should really be buying. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to buy, in my opinion. There's not really anything it does that, like, it makes it a highlight, and I'm spending too much time on it. Next up, we have the MSI X570 Godlike. So this motherboard, in my opinion, is a mess, and you can clearly see that it is a mess because of this rear I/O, and then the fact that they included 10 gig LAN as an expansion card. The one cool feature about this motherboard is that you do get 4 PCIe X16 slots, but the X570 platform is limited to only 16 PCIe lanes from the CPU and another 4 from the chipset. So the only valid configurations of PCIe on this motherboard are X16004, 8084, and 8444, which means if you want to run two-way SLI, this middle PCIe slot becomes useless. Really, like, there's a few very niche use cases for this PCIe slot layout that this motherboard comes with. But if you don't know for a fact that your use case works with this PCIe slot layout, do not buy this motherboard. Seriously, it's like, it's not meant for you. This board is just, in my opinion, a mess. The 10 gig shouldn't be an expansion card. It should be integrated into the board, but hey, MSI evidently didn't think it through that much, and it's $650. Like, this falls into the same category as the X570 Extreme. It costs way too much. You shouldn't be buying this. Next, we have the Crosshair 8 formula. Hey, you know how much, like, I didn't like the water block on the Aqua, and guess what? I don't like the water block on this either. And actually, I like this water block even less because this cools only the VRM. So your chipset fan is still very much a thing, which is just dumb. It's just like, guys, why isn't the VRM cool? Like, why whatever. This is a dumb board. Hey, did you think the X57, the Crosshair 8 Hero from Asus wasn't expensive enough? Well, we've got the formula for you. You can pay more to get a Hero with a useless water block. Who doesn't love that? Next, what else do we have? Oh, we have the X570 Creator. This is actually a legitimately cool board because this has Thunderbolt 3. It's got 10 gig LAN. It's got a great VRM. If you want Thunderbolt 3, if you want 10 gig LAN, this is kind of the board for you. You know, you got some PC M.2 slots, you've got some, you got a postcode, power button, reset. You kind of have, like, in terms of just raw feature list, I think this is the best featured board in general. Like, you straight up can't find any other boards with like, there's very few motherboards with Thunderbolt 3, and they're all from Asrock. So yeah, this is kind of the best option if you want the Thunderbolt 3 and the 10 gig LAN. So yeah, cool board because of that. Next, we have the Creation from MSI. See, this is what a rear I/O should look like on a flagship motherboard, not that disgusting mess that the Godlike comes with. This has 10 gig LAN integrated into the motherboard because, again, somebody actually put some thought into configuring the feature set of this motherboard. The one downside to this board is that it doesn't have BIOS flashback. The one advantage that it has over, say, the Creator, because this doesn't have Thunderbolt 3, this just has 10 gig LAN and 1 gig Intel, which is the same, like, the LAN configuration is the same as the Creator, it just doesn't have the Thunderbolt 3. The one advantage this does have, in my opinion, is that this has MSI's BIOS instead of Asrock's BIOS. I really don't like Asrock BIOS, but at the same time is like, if you're doing a workstation and you need the Thunderbolt 3, just go get the Creator. I mean, there's not really a debate there because this doesn't have Thunderbolt 3. So yeah, moving on. So Creation, cool board. I'd say, if you want just a very heavily, like a very feature heavy board and you're like considering the Godlike, you should probably get the Creation instead. Because the Creation just does the Creation is just, in my opinion, like the Godlike should have been based on the Creation. I don't know what they did with the Godlike. It just doesn't make any sense. Next, we have the Crosshair 8 Impact. The Crosshair 8 Impact is like, if you love extreme overclocking, this board is for you. If you love memory overclocking, this board is for you. If you're budget conscious, it's not for you. So it's kind of the thing is like, this is a really cool overclocking board, but it's also $430. So unless you just have to have basically like the rally car of the motherboard world, because let's be honest, the VRM on this isn't exactly the most powerful, but it's got 2 DIMM slots, so it's going to be killer at memory I'm spending too much time on this. Great memory overclocking, great extreme overclocking support, very expensive. If you're not gonna if you're not into competitive overclocking, this motherboard doesn't make sense. If you are into competitive overclocking, then go for it, sure. Anyway, next we have an Asrock rack board. So this is a server board. I don't do server stuff, and yeah, you're gonna have to, like, if you're a server guy, you can figure out if you need that better than I can. So anyway, moving on. Crosshair 8 Hero. This is a great all-around board. It comes with Wi-Fi. It's kind of expensive, but yeah, it's all around. It's a great board. The main issue with this board is that the Master exists, and the Master kind of does everything the Hero does. But before we get to the Master, like the thing is, yeah, if you like Asus, like if you need the Wi-Fi, because the thing is there's a non-Wi-Fi version of this that is cheaper, but if you need the Wi-Fi and you just hate Gigabyte BIOS, then yeah, sure, go for this. But in my opinion, the Master just is a better board, and personally I prefer Gigabyte's BIOS. Well, it's not that the Master's a better board, it's like they're equal as motherboards go, but I prefer Gigabyte's BIOS. Anyway, next we have the Gaming 7 Wi-Fi. This is really overpriced. I don't know what's going on with the price point on that. Asus we have the WS X570-Ace from Asus. The defining feature of this motherboard is that it has X8, X8, X8 for the PCIe slot configuration. This PCIe slot goes through the chipset. There are some niche use cases where that can actually be useful. I'm not sure what, like, I've thought of one where it's like, well, no, we can't get into it. It'll take too long. So yeah, this board's not meant for me. Maybe if you need, more PCIe lanes than what you can normally get out of an X570 board, you should consider this. But I'd argue at that point, you may as well look at like X299 or Threadripper, because like, especially X299, like the CPUs are getting cheaper and you're going to get 44 PCIe lanes directly from the CPU. So like, that's just better, right, than doing weird things with chipset lanes. Unfortunately, Threadripper 3 just has an insanely high entry price, which, like, I honestly think AMD made space for X299 with the Threadripper prices. Like, Threadripper starts at $1,300, which is just like, yeah, so now X299 makes sense because you can get a 44 PCIe lane CPU for like under $1,000 from Intel. Anyway, now we have the non-Wi-Fi Hero. Great board. But yeah, like if you're going to buy a Hero, I'm not going to tell you not to buy a Hero. I'm just going to tell you, hey, you should maybe consider the Master, because the Master does basically the same things. And I personally prefer Gigabyte's BIOS these days over the Asus BIOS. Now, a few years ago, I really preferred Asus BIOS to all of the BIOS, but yeah, I think Gigabyte's BIOS has gotten a lot better recently. And Asus, the other thing is, I think Asus BIOS has gone downhill for the last couple of years. So that's kind of the issue. Anyway, this has Wi-Fi as well. It has QFlash, it has clear CMOS, it has a postcode, dual BIOS on this, which is kind of neat. So yeah, this is a great board. Personally, like in the $350 price range, the Master is my favorite board in this area. Then we have the Meg Case from MSI. The problem with this board is that MSI decided to make the Unify, and the Unify does basically everything that Ace does, except the Unify does it cheaper. So yeah, that's the thing, is just like, hey, like there's nothing inherently wrong with the Ace, and if you think the Ace is a good fit for you, I'd just say you should maybe consider the Unify, which we'll get to. Phantom Gaming X from Asrock. This is like a Tai-Chi, but with one extra LAN port. And the Tai-Chi is a hell of a lot cheaper. So it's like you could just get the Tai-Chi instead, in my opinion. But hey, if you want dual LAN and, postcode, all of the overclocking features, well, the thing is, there's other boards as well. Like, I don't really like this board. It just, like, because here's the thing. Like, you could go spend $20, $30 more, get the Master, or maybe the Ace for $10 more, and, well, I prefer MSI's BIOS, like, honestly, a lot. Though it is true that this does have 8 SATA ports. Like, that's, I guess, the sort of highlight feature of this is the 8 SATA ports. But then there's also the X570E, which, you know, it gives you the postcode as well. It's kind of in a dumb location, but there is a postcode. There's also some troubleshooting LEDs up there. VRM on this is really solid. This is actually a better VRM than what you'd get on the Phantom Gaming X. This is a very similar VRM to what you'd get on the X570 Hero, on the Crosshair 8 Hero. You've got dual LAN, you've got Wi-Fi 6, you got clear CMOS, no, BIOS flashback, no clear CMOS on the rear IO. That kind of sucks, but all around pretty solid board. It's just $315, and you can kind of get the same feature set out of the, like, this has more also has 8 SATA ports. So yeah, straight up between the Phantom Gaming X and this, I'd take this. Thank you very like I'll take the Dash E from Asus, especially since now it's like $315 and not $330, because at $330 it's like, well, it's kind of too close to the other more expensive boards. This is overpriced. I don't know what's going on with that price. That looks like a pricing error. This looks X570 Unify, or they just don't want to sell any motherboards if that's not an error. The X570 Unify, so this is an ACE minus a LAN port, literally. Like, they've removed a LAN port, and they've removed a lot of the stupid bling, like the RGB and the heat. Like, the heat pipe didn't really achieve anything, in my opinion, so it's just like, eh. So they've removed a lot of the things that made the ACE expensive for no good reason. The postcode's in a more useful location. I think if you just want an all-around good overclocking board, this is kind of a good option. The thing is, the Tai Chi exists, and that kind of does everything this does, and it also gives you more SATA ports. So yeah, but this is not a bad board. It's just like, maybe you should consider getting the Tai Chi. And I admit, like, I do prefer MSI's BIOS to Asrock's. So that is something to consider. So Unify is solid. The Auris Ultra, dumb board. Straight up dumb. It has 3 M.2 PCIe slots, but it just, like, there's no debugging features. You can get, like, BIOS flashback you can get on the other boards, like Asrock, MSI, both have BIOS flashback. Even the Asus board has BIOS flashback. This really, like, it doesn't add anything. So yeah, this is just a step behind the other boards. The Meg Ace, like, I guess if you need well, no, because you lose the SATA ports if you use one of the extra M.2 slot, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, just straight up, this board doesn't make any sense. You should just avoid it. You should just look at the Unify or look at the Tai Chi instead. Right, so the X570 Tai Chi. I have this board. It's great. I can really, like, still, Asrock BIOS is still as clunky as ever, and I still don't like it, but for the price, this thing is a great board because it's $280 and it's very full, like, it's fully featured in terms of, as far as I'm concerned. You've got a postcode, you've got a solid 12-phase VRM, you've got a power button, reset button, clear CMOS button, you've got a clear CMOS on the rear IO, which they're not going to show us. Oh no, they will show us. So there's a clear CMOS, there's a BIOS flashback button. It's basically got everything you could ever need. It just doesn't have dual LAN, which is one of the features that the more expensive boards add that this doesn't offer. So yeah, really solid board in my opinion. And like if you just want a motherboard that kind of does a little bit of everything, Tai Chi is a really solid choice. Next we have the X570 Auris Pro. This is like the Ultra but cheaper, which honestly, like, that's a good idea, except the thing is the Tai Chi right now is just like, the Tai Chi's, see that? Just get the Tai Chi instead. X470 Tai Chi Ultimate. Do you want 10 gig LAN? If you need 10 gig LAN and you just need it as cheap as possible, this is the motherboard for you, because yeah, this has 10 gig LAN. That's literally the only it has 10 gig LAN. That's the defining feature here. This is the cheapest way to get a Quantia 10 gig LAN on an AM4 motherboard. There's no cheaper way to get 10 gig. So if you just want 10 gig and you don't care about PCIe 4.0, which you probably shouldn't, because like I really don't, like, PCIe 4.0 is going to be a gimmick for at least the next several years, because even right now 2080 Ti's do not max out a 2080 Ti is far from maxing out a single 3.0 16 slot. So I think you're going to need like maybe a 5080 Ti before we see, you know, the PCIe 4.0 bandwidth actually being useful. And at that point, your CPU might be a bottleneck. So anyway, Tai Chi Ultimate, X570 Auris Pro Wi-Fi. So this is like the Pro, except it adds Wi-Fi and somehow manages to also be cheaper. Straight up, like, the thing is, the Tai Chi exists. Like, you may as well just get the X570 Tai Chi. Right, like the X570 Tai Chi, or even the X470 Tai Chi Ultimate. Though the Tai Chi Ultimate, the X470 one is going to have weaker memory overclocking support than the X570 board, so that is something to watch out for. What else do we have? Oh, we have this Asrock server board. I don't do server stuff, but this exists. There, goodbye. Let's move on to X570i. The Strix. This is my favorite ITX motherboard on X570. It's got the strongest VRM of all the X570 ITX boards. Yeah, well, that's why it's my favorite, right? We all know I love a good VRM, and this one's got it. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this thing. And also, it's not that ridiculously expensive. In my opinion, this board kind of invalidates the existence of the Impact, because I'm pretty sure the memory configuration here is the exact same as what you'd get on the Impact, and this is a lot cheaper. So, yeah, if you don't need the postcode and the like clear CMOS slow mode and other extreme overclocking features, this is a really great board. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, if you're considering one of those, I'm not going to tell you to change your mind. Like, I think that's a great board. This, no, 200, no, doesn't make any sense. This doesn't, okay, this board, hey, well, no, like, the thing is, this is how much is it? It's $240, so, yeah, no, like, the VRM on this board is weak, and there's no real features that make up for the fact that the VRM is weak. Right, like this rear I/O, you can get that on a bunch of other boards. Gigabyte, all the Gigabyte boards have flashback. The LAN, like, you can get the Wi-Fi and the LAN on other motherboards as well. Like, I really don't see, like, I don't know why this board exists. I think MSI really screwed up with the pricing. If this was $200, it would maybe be competitive, but as it is, it's $240. It's not competitive. So let's move on. Gaming Pro Carbon Wi-Fi. Yeah, so dumb board. Dash F Gaming from Asus. Right now, this is a straight up better pick than the X570 Dash Pro, because the Dash Pro, like, these are the same motherboard, like same PCB, same VRM, same everything, except this one adds BIOS flashback. This one doesn't have BIOS flashback. So that's the thing. And I think no, this doesn't even like add Wi-Fi or anything. So yeah, actually, you get like, oh, this might have a few extra USB ports. So this is just kind of the better board right now, because they're at the same price. Now, in the past, this board used to be a lot more expensive, and then it didn't make any bloody sense. But right now, at $240, this is actually a pretty solid choice. Because it does, like, if you want to BIOS flashback from Asus, the only issue is there's no Wi-Fi, which I think is kind of dumb for a motherboard in this price range. There's no Wi-Fi option for that motherboard, because you can get the Extreme 4 with Wi-Fi 6, which I wouldn't really get this board because, well, I don't know. For Wi-Fi 6, this is actually kind of a cheap option, but the thing is, the VRM on this is kind of weak. It's not as bad as, say, the Gaming Pro Carbon, but the VRM is kind of weak, so I don't know. Like, this is not a great board in my opinion, but it's not terrible, so it's just like, eh. You know, I wouldn't complain too much if you went for that. Extreme 4, again, same thing, just no Wi-Fi this time. I don't, like, well, actually, with the non-Wi-Fi version, you may want to consider just getting a Gigabyte, like, Auris Elite, or... well, I just straight up would skip over this one. If you're not going to get the Wi-Fi 6 version of the Extreme 4, I would just ignore the Extreme 4 completely. Crosshair 7 Hero, if you want overclocking features and you don't care about PCIe 4.0, this is a great board. This is an absolutely great board. This is one of the few high-end X470 motherboards that, in my opinion, makes sense, because it just has so many overclocking features that you just won't get at this price point any other way. So... yeah, this can make a lot of sense if you want your postcode, if you want your BIOS flashback functionality, if you want clear CMOS on the rear I/O, if you want just like overclocking features. If you're into overclocking and you can't afford, like, you don't want to spend for like a $350 or even a Tai Chi, right? Like, this is a really solid option, especially like the non-Wi-Fi version is another $20 cheaper. So you can go for a $220, well, no, $10 cheaper, but you could get a $220 board with like all of the extreme overclocking features. This is the best X5, like, this is the second best. Well, where is, actually, I don't think the Asrock ITX, but this is a really solid, like, if you want to run a 12 core or a 16 core, and you want to overclock them, this is a really solid option. Like, this is a solid ITX board. I wouldn't really push you away from it. It's just like, you might also want to consider the Strix, or maybe the Asrock one has that weird mounting. The Asrock one, I think you should consider if it has Thunderbolt, like if you need Thunderbolt, because that's what that one offers. But yeah, that's a solid board. It's just like, you might want to consider the Strix instead, because the Strix VRM is like, what, 33% more powerful, and the Strix has a fan integrated into its VRM cooling system, which this doesn't, and the heatsink, like, the heatsink on this is actually kind of terrible. X470 Tai Chi doesn't make sense. The Tai Chi Ultimate makes sense because it has 10 gig. This doesn't have 10 gig, so it doesn't make sense. Auris Elite Wi-Fi. Hey, you know, X570 with Wi-Fi. This is a great VRM on this board. Well, not great. Solid VRM on this board. This is the same VRM you'd get from like an X570 Tai Chi, though. The downside with this motherboard is there's literally zero troubleshooting features. It does still have BIOS flashback, right? There, it has, well, no, it's not here. Where is it? There. You have a BIOS flashback button down there. So that's kind of the thing. All of the X570 Gigabyte boards have BIOS flashback, but anyway, let's move on because I really don't have time. I don't want this video being an hour. So that's the Elite Wi-Fi. MSI Gaming Edge Wi-Fi. This board just doesn't make sense. Like, the VRM on this is just straight up weak. And the thing is, you might be like, but Buildzoid, why are you focusing so much on the VRM? People might run a 3600 or a 3700X. Those don't need a lot of VRM. And you're right about that. Those don't need a lot of VRM. They also don't need a X570 motherboard, right? Like, I'm assuming automatically, if you're going to be shelling out $200 for an X570 board or more, you're buying a 3900X or a 3950X, because sticking a 3700X into a $200 X570 motherboard doesn't make your 3700X any faster than if it was in a 130, well, if it was 100, if you put it into a $100 B450 board, right? Like, that's the thing, is just like there's no real advantage to that. So I'd expect you to be buying a high-end CPU, and this board at $200, it just doesn't do anything that justifies the price tag. It, like, so what? Like, what does this do, right? Where is the thing that makes this better than the Elite? There isn't a thing that makes this better than the Elite, because this has the same feature set as the Elite, but the VRM is a downgrade, so don't buy it. Why? Like, there. And then we get the Auris Elite. Where's the... What the hell? Swear there's a board I missed. No, Asus. Oh, whoa, it's cheap. So this, then we have the Auris Elite. So, hey, it's the Elite minus the Wi-Fi, so it's a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't have the Wi-Fi. I mean, there's not really much else to say about this. This is definitely, like, I do prefer, like, if you want a really solid, you know, motherboard in terms of VRM, and then you also want Intel LAN, this is a great option, because at this price point, you're not going to find a better combination of VRM and networking, like Intel, having Intel 1 gig LAN. So, yeah, that's kind of the thing. There's still no debug features, though, which kind of sucks. Anyway, what else do we have? Avoid. Like, this is just too expensive, because Asus has a B450 ITX board, which is much cheaper, and it's the same VRM, so you could just get that instead, because it's an ITX, like X470 and B450, the differentiation between those two chipsets is how many PCIe slots you have. It's an ITX board. It doesn't have more than one, right? There's no point getting an X470 version of an ITX motherboard. X570 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi from MSI. Oh no, this is the tough Wi-Fi from. This is so annoying. Why is everybody using Gaming Plus as a motherboard name? Like, I get confused by that. Anyway, this is one of. If you want Wi-Fi, you want a solid VRM. This is the other option to the Elite Wi-Fi. This also has some troubleshooting features. So honestly, if you want, if you're gonna use Wi-Fi with your motherboard, I would get this instead of the Elite. Because this is just like, this actually has some troubleshooting LEDs, and it has like, the VRM is very, very similar. It actually, this VRM is, in terms of voltage regulation, slightly better, just because Asus implemented their, like, the funny thing is, in terms of components, these are very similar VRMs, but the Asus implementation overall is just a bit better. So yeah, like, this is a slightly better VRM. Also, the heatsink on this is better. So yeah, I'd get this instead of the Elite. Instead of the Elite Wi-Fi. Now, what else do we have? Though you might dislike Asus BIOS, in which case you might want to go for the Gigabyte board. Steel Legend Wi-Fi 6. This is the cheapest way to get Wi-Fi 6 that I'm aware of. Though normally this motherboard... Actually, I'm not sure that it tends to be much more expensive. So the VRM on this thing is not... Like, it's weaker than what you'd get on the Elite or the Tough, but it's not so weak that it's actually a massive issue. So yeah, if you just want Wi-Fi 6, this is a solid option for getting that. What else do we have? No, overpriced, and honestly, even when X470 was relevant, this board wasn't. X570M Pro 4. This is the thing is, if this VRM didn't suck, it was like really was good, then I would be like, sure, go for this. But as it is, you could just get a B450 board and get a similarly low quality. Like, the VRM quality wouldn't really change if you got a B450 board instead. So that's kind of the thing. I'm not really a big fan of this motherboard, but... And also, it's $180. It's just dumb. And if you're like, but Buildzoid, I really want to build an M-ATX system. Well, I'm sorry, but M-ATX has been deemed a dead form factor by the motherboard vendors, which is why all of the M-ATX motherboard choices kind of suck. Anyway, next we have the X470-F. So this is a solid motherboard. The main issue right now is that it's $170, and you can get X570 boards that are more solid for less. Yes, I know. So that's kind of the thing. Also, it doesn't have BIOS flashback, so compatibility with the third gen CPUs is going to be kind of it's going to be a problem. You're going to need to probably ask the store to flash it for you, and they might charge you for that. Then the price gets even less competitive, and yeah. It's kind of the thing. X570 Gaming X, no. The thing is, you can get other motherboards well, this has BIOS flashback, but it's an X570 board, so, if you're buying it now, like, the BIOS flashback becomes a useful feature if you're buying this motherboard before the launch of, like, 4000 series CPUs. But you're buying it for a 3000 series CPUs, the BIOS flashback doesn't really do anything for you right now. So it's kind of the thing. And the VRM on this is not worth celebrating. Like, there's nothing really super great about this board that is just like, yeah, this is a good reason to get it. MSI X470 Gaming Pro Carbon. This is actually, like, this was a solid X470 board. The issue is at 107, like, it's just not competitive at this point. With, like, you can get X570 boards that are better. Like, especially you can get, oh, wait, no. So, yeah, I wouldn't get this just because there's other boards that do what that does better. I would avoid this. Like, oh, no. This VRM heatsink is too small. Also, it's an X470 ITX board, which inherently X470 ITX boards don't make any sense. You should just get, if you're going ITX B450 or X570, actually, even the thing is, X570 ITX boards, you're not buying them because they add PCIe 4.0 or something like that. They just have way better VRMs than the ITX B450 boards, or the ITX X470 boards. Okay, so hey, if you don't care about the fact that this has Realtek LAN instead of Intel LAN, which, like, I'm kind of I prefer my Intel LAN, but most people, have Realtek LAN, and it's not like, there's nothing really, well, I don't know. I've not tested Realtek LAN in ages, but if you don't mind the fact that this is on Realtek LAN, which you probably shouldn't mind, this is a really solid board. And at this price point, it is ridiculously competitive. Like, they're just, if you have $160 to spend on a motherboard, don't ask questions, buy this. Seriously, unless you need Wi-Fi, buy this. Like, it's this good. Like, honestly, I'm really surprised that this board gets to be this cheap right now. This is an insane price tag for this board. Like, this is such a solid board. Because this is literally the same VRM and everything as the tough Wi-Fi version, but it just doesn't have the Wi-Fi. So, yeah, I would totally go for that. That's a great board right there. Next, we have the Gaming K4. This just sucks. This always sucked. I would avoid that. X570 Pro 4, get the tough instead. X570 Gaming Plus, get the tough instead. Phantom Gaming 4 Wi-Fi. Okay, yeah, if you need Wi-Fi 6 and you need Wi-Fi 6 cheap, this is an even cheaper way of getting Wi-Fi 6, but this VRM really is not impressive. So, yeah, that's kind of the consideration for that board if you just want the Wi-Fi 6. But if you don't want Wi-Fi 6, then I would avoid that motherboard. X570 Steel Legend. Okay, this is kind of viable. Again, the tough just has a better VRM though, and a better BIOS, because Asrock BIOS is, my tier list for BIOSes is like MSI, Gigabyte, EVGA are all tied for first place. Then we have Asus, and then there's Asrock at the bottom. And I'd say for beginners, MSI BIOS is a bit friendlier than Gigabyte. It's like, personally, I like Gigabyte BIOS quite well, but yeah, and Asrock BIOS is definitely my least favorite. So, yeah, X570 Steel Legend, it's like the thing is, the tough just, well, there's, how much of a price difference? Yeah, it's $5, get the tough instead. Unless there's, like, if the tough is significantly more expensive, then sure, the Steel Legend makes sense, but if they're $5 apart, get the tough. X570 UD, you might as well get the tough or the Steel Legend instead of this, because it's not, well, no, just get the tough. Like, seriously, just go, like, upgrade to the tough. Like, $15. Or you could just go, the thing is, like, this board just isn't very good in any way. Like, the VRM on this is better than, like, past generation X470 or B450 motherboards from Gigabyte, but that's still not a great VRM. So you could just go for the Steel Legend or the tough instead. Next, we have the Phantom Gaming 4. I would just straight up avoid that for the same reasons I would avoid the UD. X470 Ultra Gaming, avoid. Gaming Pro Carbon, the thing is, the Gaming Pro Carbon has a similar-ish feature set. Like, this has Wi-Fi, so if you want the Wi-Fi, then yeah, this is a solid board. But if you don't want the Wi-Fi, then you can just get the X570A Pro, and this is just straight up better in terms of Ryzen 3rd gen support. And this kind of makes sense because it's $140. Also, one thing I really wish somebody had tested with this VRM is you can actually underclock the VRM on this to try get more efficiency out of this. And I've just not seen anybody actually try to do that. And it really makes me wonder, like, because this thing is this thing had so Hardware Unboxed tested this motherboard for VRM thermals, and they were awful. And well, one thing I'm wondering is maybe MSI is just shipping this board with way too much switching frequency out of the box, because you could drop the switching like you can significantly reduce the heat output if you just drop the switching frequency. And this is an 8-phase, so it's like running the switching frequency really low shouldn't really hurt anything, since it has so many phases. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's just like, so, and if you're running like a 3600 or a 3700X, then this motherboard is actually sensible. It's just like for a 3900X, it's not sensible. So yeah, and the VRM on this isn't really any better. So, you know, between these two, yeah, I'd probably go for the A Pro unless you need Wi-Fi, but this also is on the light BIOS, and this doesn't have BIOS flashback, so the BIOS, you know, flashing. Actually, no, this does have BIOS flashback. So, yeah, but this is on the light BIOS, which means the BIOS isn't quite so fully featured as the one you'd get on the X570 board. X470 Master SLI, I would just straight up avoid that. B450i Gaming, hey, look, if you want to run a 3700X in a ITX system, this is a really good option. The only issue is it doesn't have BIOS flashback, so you're going to have to figure out some way to get it flashed. But solid board if you're, you know, 3700X or even a 3900X or 3950X. If you're just running them at stock or just not really overclocking them very much, then this board would be fine. Anyway, X470-Pro, the biggest issue, like, this is a relatively solid board. Again, if you're going to run even a 3900X, you could kind of get, well, again, depends on how much you're overclocking. That's the thing with the low-end boards, is it really depends on, like, your airflow and how much you're overclocking. If you're not overclocking, then you can kind of get away with anything, except motherboards with absolutely no VRM heatsinks. Like, those you can't get away with those, because if you just run a high enough core count workload, then you're going to overload the VRM. Yeah, this is a decent-ish board. It's just like, it doesn't have BIOS flashback. Honestly, I would just get the MSI X570, because this doesn't, like, it doesn't have Wi-Fi or anything. It's basically, okay, well, it is $7. No, $7. Just get the MSI instead. And we get the tough X470 Plus Gaming. Just straight up avoid this board. Like, I would just straight up avoid it, because there's nothing really, there's no redeeming features about that. And then we get to this thing. So this is an X570 motherboard. Oh yeah, so actually, X570 Pro, ignore it. Get this instead. Well, actually, this is really stripped down. So here's the thing. This is a really great VRM attached to not a lot of motherboard. There's barely, like, this thing is stripped down. Right, like, there's very few features on it. You've just kind of got the bare minimum in terms of rear I/O. The audio section is stripped down, but hey, like, you've got a solid VRM. You've got a, I do believe it's on a 6-layer PCB, so the memory overclocking support should be solid. And even a 4-layer board can do a good job. It's just 6-layer boards can do a slightly better job. So this is like if you're going to run a 3900X or 3950X and you're going to overclock them and you just don't care for anything like Wi-Fi, or you just plan to kind of add everything through, like, extra peripherals for your motherboard over USB or something, this is a solid option, actually. Right? You can also get PCIe to USB cards, so, you know, the lack of USB ports. Like, this is a good bare minimum motherboard. A really good bare minimum motherboard. Normally it's a lot more expensive, but for some reason Amazon is, like, selling them for $127 right now, and at $127 this is a great board. Like, there's nothing, like, VRM wise, this is competitive. Like, this is the same VRM that you'd get on, like, an Extreme 4, or a similar VRM to what you'd get on an Extreme 4 from Asrock, except this is so much cheaper. So this is a really solid board. This is invalid due to the price point of this right now, but otherwise this is a decent, like, this is a better board than the Tough. Okay, it's a better board than the Tough, but that's not really saying much, because this is a straight up avoid from me. Though this is a, yeah, this is 126, so, because that's 132. No, for one, like, I'd get this instead of this, because I don't think this has BIOS flashback, does it? I'm not sure. And unfortunately, PC Part Picker isn't going to let us see. I don't think it has BIOS flashback. So since it doesn't have BIOS flashback, you may as well just get the X470-Pro instead, assuming the prices don't change too much. Avoid, just straight up avoid that one. This is viable if you're going to run, like, APUs or 6 cores. You know, if you're on a 6-core or an APU, this is a viable board. If you have an 8-core, and, well, 8-core at stock, you're fine. If you're going to overclock, not fine. Because this VRM is a 4+2 phase, and that VRM heatsink, like, not big enough. Absolutely not big enough in the VRM heatsink department. So that's kind of the issue with that one. What else do we have? Avoid. Oh yeah, this has a 6-phase VRM using 60 amp power stages. I would on it like I'd be surprised if this had two. Like this could probably do okay with a 3900X. Or even a 3950X. Really depends on how much airflow you have, because that VRM heatsink looks kind of anemic. But other than that, like the actual componentry is good. It's just that the airflow situation is gonna it really depends on how much airflow you have available for this board. So what else do we have? Avoid. It's 116. This is like, the thing is, the VRM on this is not great. It has the heat sinks are relatively solid. Feature set kind of, well, there's no BIOS flashback, so I don't really like this board very much. I'm not really sure why you'd get this. Instead of like, well, not that, but like you could get a Tomahawk Max, which would give you a similar VRM with a similar heatsink situation and a similar feature set for a similar price. Like I'd just get the Tomahawk instead, because this actually comes with out of the box support for Ryzen 3rd gen, whereas this, who knows, right? Like it might, but it's not necessarily, it's not guaranteed. And then you're going to have a problem because it doesn't have BIOS flashback functionality. X470 Gaming Pro, I would just avoid that. Unless you need like SLI support or something, I would just avoid that, which is kind of the same situation with the Gaming Plus. Is just like, you can, like with the Gaming Plus, you could just get the Tomahawk Max instead, unless you need SLI. That's really the only thing this adds. What else do we have? B450 Tomahawk, just straight up avoid, because this is not significantly cheaper than the Max version, so just get the Max. And same here, is just get the Max. Tough B450 Plus, avoid. 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 This, like, I'm not sure where the, like, well, this downgrades the VRM cooling from the Max. I mean, from the Tomahawk, it downgrades the VRM cooling. This is still a pretty, like, it looks like a fashion, like, this heatsink has a decent amount of mass and surface area. It's just like the fins are cut into it so that you don't really see them. So yeah, these both are kind of like, if you don't want to mess around with BIOS updates, both of those are solid options. And this one is a, what is it, $15 cheaper. So yeah, if you're on a shoestring budget, this thing can make sense. I would not stick a 3900X in it. If you're buying a 3900X and putting it in a $100 board, you don't have a shoestring budget. You're just bad at budgeting. Anyway, B450A Pro Max. I think this board currently, like, considering that the Gaming Plus costs the same, I would just get the Gaming Plus instead, because as far as I can tell, they're the same thing. Both, like, they're the same board. So, yeah. Then we get the Gaming Plus. This has BIOS flashback. So if you want an M-ATX motherboard, this does support 64 gigs of RAM. You can install 64 gigs of RAM in this. You just need 32 gig DIMMs. The VRM on this is not, like, I think it's similar to what you get on the Gaming Plus Max. Your SoC VRM isn't heat synced, but that isn't really a huge deal. The thing is, like, so yeah, if you want an M-ATX board for like a 3600, 3700X, I would get this, because it does have BIOS flashback. The main downside to this motherboard is that you're going to be stuck on the light BIOS. You're not going to have the full BIOS, but again, like, my experience with the light BIOS has been, it's relatively good. The main thing is just like having the BIOS flashback so that you don't need to get the motherboard updated, well, so that you don't have problems with BIOS updates for it, because it might not come with support for 3rd gen. B450, I would just avoid that board, and I would avoid this as well, because, well, actually, you don't need to avoid this. It's just like the Max exists, and the Max is barely more expensive, right? It's just $5 more. This is, I would rather have the Gaming Plus from MSI. The thing is just like MSI's, like the VRM on this is going to be superior, and the BIOS is better on this than on this. So yeah, I would just get the MSI instead. What else do we have? Avoid. These don't have VRM heatsinks, so just straight up avoid them. I would still, like, this isn't that much cheaper. I would avoid that as well. How much? Nope, avoid. Well, I guess if you want, does this have like BIOS flashback or something to redeem itself? I don't think it does, so I would avoid it. Right, like, because it's like $90, and somebody might be like, but 4 DIMMs, and it's just like, if you're like having lots of memory sticks cost money. So it's just like, I don't know. I guess maybe you might be like upgrade path or something, but I personally, I would just avoid that board. What else do we have? Tough B450M Plus gaming. Okay, so the thing is, this doesn't have BIOS flashback either. Does it? Yeah, no, it doesn't. It does. That's the thing. And oh my God, there's no USB ports on this thing. Whoa, this is stripped down. The thing is, I would probably take this over the Steel Legend. It's just like there's still like these boards. Like you can just. The issue is that MSI's best MATX motherboard is currently out of stock, so there's no price point for it. So we'll get to that. Yeah, don't like this. Don't like that. Don't like. Well, no, don't like that because that's not a max version. Like, and I don't think it has BIOS flashback. Well, I can't see if it has BIOS flashback, but I don't think it does. So, yeah, I just don't like that. No, again, like if this had BIOS flashback, it might be viable, but as it is, no. No. Like the thing is, once we get to the low end, it's just going to be me going, nope. Because at some point, we just get to motherboards where it's like the packaging is a, significant percentage of the total cost of the board. And like on a motherboard that costs, like, here's the thing. On a motherboard that costs, say, $80, I think the chipset is probably like, is like 1/8 of the price is the actual chipset itself. And that's when the motherboard is like, well, the thing is, there's a fixed cost for certain parts of the motherboard, like the socket, like the 8-pin power connector, like the 24-pin, like the chipset, like the PCIe slots, like the DIMM slots. And at that point, it's just like, yeah, when the plastic starts costing a significant amount of the total cost of the motherboards start to suck because they're running out of things to like cut corners on, right? It's just like, oh, we're running out of things to cut off to lower the price point. And that's when the motherboards start getting like the amount of downgrading that needs to take place to slightly drop the price point is insane. And the motherboard, like cheap motherboards just don't make sense because of that. Because like the packaging costs too much. So yeah, like I would just straight up, well, I guess if you're completely desperate, this might not be a complete disaster. It still has heat sinks at the very least. Right? Yeah. Well, this also has a heat sink. And I think the VRM on these is actually comparable. Though this has less heat sinks than this does, but is there anything redeeming for... well, yeah, no, they're both kind of awful. And both of them are going to need BIOS updates, so it's just like, yeah. So the motherboard I would have recommended for MATX builds is the Mortar Max, but unfortunately that seems to be completely out of stock right now, so... or not listed anywhere, so that really, really sucks, because that is my favorite MATX board. And I'm just gonna quickly glance, and yeah, there's nothing really down here that I see. If this was in stock, then maybe this would be another option for MATX. But again, BIOS support is like, this has better BIOS support. That's that's the biggest thing there. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up all of the different AM4 motherboards. That are worth considering, like the X370, B350. I would just not consider B350 and X370 boards at all, or A320. Like that's just not like those are just motherboard chipsets that don't fall within like my interests at all. So yeah, I guess if we like highlight motherboards for me, I would just ignore the ultra high end. I would honestly like Creator is an interesting motherboard. The Creation is an interesting motherboard. This is an interesting motherboard. So now I'm going through like my personal favorites list. So yeah, Creator is interesting because it has the Thunderbolt 3 and it has the 10 gig. This is interesting because it has the 10 gig. But actually the Creator kind of negates the existence of the Creation in a lot of ways. But I really like the number of USB ports that has. Then I like the Master. The Unify is kind of cool. The Tai Chi is really cool because like it's got a great feature set for the price point. The Tai Chi Ultimate is interesting if you really just want the 10 gig. What else do we have? The Tough. Where's the bloody Tough? Because the Tough is great. The Tough deserves to be on like Buildzoid's short list of motherboards. Oh yeah, then there's the X570 Strix. So that's a great board. this, where is it? I'm not seeing anymore. Too many motherboards. Yeah, X570 ITX. Like, this is a solid board as well. It's just like the Strix kind of like, you know, the Strix is just better. And then there's the tough Wi-Fi, which is a great board. And then there's, of course, the tough non-Wi-Fi, which is, where is it? Like, it is way down. Yeah, so this is a great board, like, especially at this price. Like, wait, no, that's the X470. No, not that one. The X570. Where is it? There it is. Yeah, that's a great board, especially at this price point. Like, that's a really great board. Avoid that X470 one I highlighted. I totally misspoke. I totally misread. So, yeah, those are kind of like my personal highlight motherboards. And then there's like the Tomahawk Max and the Mortar Max. And then maybe the B450M Gaming Plus. This is also a noteworthy motherboard in my opinion. Yeah, so that is all of the AM4 motherboards that, like, that's my thoughts on all of the different AM4 motherboards. Very short, put very, very shortly, because honestly, I could, you know, probably write essays about everything wrong with quite a lot of these motherboards. Like, I could run it, like, yeah, and it would take forever to just go through everything, because this is mostly just like, so yeah, hopefully this answers anybody's, you know, questions about, hey, Buildzoid, is this motherboard that I'm looking at a good motherboard? And it's just like, yeah, at the price point, a lot, like, the thing is like, if you're going for a 16 core, I would really start with like the tough, right? Like the tough, the X570 tough from Asus is like the starting point for the 16 core. That is like the bare, if you want to overclock the 16 core. If you don't overclock, you can go even as low as B450 boards, in my opinion. But otherwise, yeah, you really want to start with the tough and then go upwards in terms of just getting extra features. Yeah, so there. That is all my thoughts on all of the various AM4 motherboards that are currently well, that at least PC part picker lists. And yeah, hopefully, you know, I'm not gonna have to answer any questions about, hey, Buildzoid, is this motherboard good? Because this video exists and it answers all of those questions. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you have disagreements with me about my motherboard recommendations, I hate to say this, but I'm just going to ignore you. I'm not interested in debating this. This is my this is my list. If you think you can come up with a better one, you're free to make your own. I'm not but I'm not interested in reading it. So yeah, and yeah, and if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly. There's a link to that down in the description below. If you don't like Patreon, then there's also the AHOC Teespring store where there's shirts, there's stickers, there's posters, you know, that kind of, you know, YouTuber merch. And that helps out with running the channel immensely as well. So if you'd like to check that out, that would be great. And yeah, there's links to both down in the description. So with that, I've managed to make this video less than 50 minutes, so I'm going to hit the stop button before it becomes 50. Goodbye.